Hendry here, and welcome once again to How to Become a Pro Wrestler. And today we're going to be talking about balancing your real life stuff with pro wrestling. At what point do you go full time? At what point do you leave your education? Do you keep going? What do you do about having a full time job? What about a part time job? What's the best way to approach this? And it's an episode that probably needs done every so often because the wrestling business is constantly evolving, constantly changing. And as you know, there's no one set path to success. So, we have briefly touched on stuff like this before, but I'm going to go into more detail today. Hopefully, if you're at school, college, uni, you got a full time job, a part time job, maybe you're unemployed. I've been there. I've been in all of those situations. Whilst I've had goals in mind. So hopefully this can give you a little bit of my experience, and hopefully you can take something from it. You know the drill, people. I want to give a huge thanks to our amazing Patreon supporters. You can join the club at patreon.com/Joe Hendry. You get cool exclusive stuff. And also, if you are a tier 3 patron or above, you get a mention by name on the podcast. So there you go. That's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to give a huge shout out to our patrons, and they are James Malley, Ian Downey, Ian Callan Lees, Joe's mum, Kirsty Bailey, Chris McCulloch, Gordon Brown, Ben Wacka, Adam Wilson, Mark Leslie, Jack Godfrey, Ant191, Laura Baird, Brian Smith, Daniel Bettencourt, Jamie Flood, James Pointer, Kieran Prophet Holmes, Barbara Good, Will Ledwith, David McCarthy, Fiona Edge, Ross Wilson, Jordan Schofield, Barry Carruthers, and James Weiss. Thank you so much to all of them for supporting the podcast, making it possible, helps out with equipment, and travel expenses for Dave and stuff like that. So we got some costs here, so the Patreon really helps the podcast to sustain itself. Also, really want to say a huge thank you. It really supported me big time when it came to when I didn't have a contract, and I was kind of that gave me a little bit of breathing room to keep doing my entrances because they're expensive, and so I just want to thank the fans as always for their support. It's much appreciated. We got some really exciting developments actually. We're possibly going to be recording and streaming from a new location soon. More info on that, but that's kind of the Patreon has helped go towards what we're kind of building in the background here. So we got some really exciting stuff to chat about in the near future. But for today, we're going to talk about your future, and a lot of you. Like when I got into wrestling, I was quite lucky. I didn't really have any major responsibilities at the time, so I was able to kind of really focus in on pro wrestling. To me personally, I wouldn't recommend you do it the same way as me. What I did is I got a credit card, and I got myself a little bit caught up in like Wonga loans and stuff. So I wouldn't advise that you do that. I think if you are going to borrow money to do it, I wouldn't encourage it. But if you're absolutely going to do it, there are better ways to do it than Wonga, for God's sakes. There's much better loans and credit cards and things like that, rather than just getting rinsed on Wonga or your overdraft or something like that. And I've made a lot of mistakes financially along the way that I've had to learn, and I'm still learning, to be honest. But here's the thing, right? A lot of people say like money. First of all, money doesn't bring you happiness, right? And to me, I wouldn't say that money does bring me happiness, because anytime I do get money of any kind, all it is to me, it kind of indirectly supports my pursuit of happiness. Because anytime that I get any kind of money, I never spend it on myself or stupid stuff. You buy a few things here and there, but my lifestyle is exactly the same as it was before I had a deal or anything like that. It's exactly the same. What I'm doing now is reinvesting in business projects and other kind of ventures in wrestling. And you guys know that we've started a training school and stuff like that. So that's really where everything is going for me. But what money does do, it doesn't. I think the main thing that leads to happiness in life is a pursuit of purpose, right? So for me, I want to be a success in professional wrestling. And like I said, we talked about it on the last episode. That is one part of your life. But I feel like having that direction and that focus really helps to streamline everything. So for me, I know I want to be successful in professional wrestling. So me as a pro wrestler is one aspect of my life. Then I've got kind of the training school. That's kind of my we've got the podcast, and that's all within my professional element. And then if you back up from that, I've kind of got, friends, family, relationship. I've got my dog. I've got, what my interests and hobbies are and stuff like that. And all of these are really, you got your home life. You got, you need to go and get away for a few days every so often. You need to, pursue things you want to do, but your life you have to look at your life as a whole. And you're not necessarily, we spoke about it in the last episode, you're not going to be defined by solely by your pursuit of being successful in wrestling, but it really does help to streamline stuff. So for me, I know that I don't need to live on a lot of money. I can get by really cheap. And what I've got is basically, my setup is I own a company. I'm technically an employee of that company, and I basically pay myself a minimum wage to get by, and whatever else I have left over, I reinvest into new business projects, such as starting a training school or getting new equipment and stuff like that. So because my lifestyle never really changes for me as an individual, having money as such doesn't change how I view myself or the world or my actual experience. I still have to have the same thoughts when I'm shopping at the supermarket, or when we're making a decision if we're going to go to dinner, or what we're going to do recreationally that week. These things haven't changed, but what does change when you have money coming in is that you can now pursue more passion projects. Like for me, having a training school is a passion project. Having a podcast is a passion project for me. So now, and that brings me happiness and purpose within my professional world. So don't see money as something that's going to make you happy, but don't ever underestimate its value to help you pursue your own happiness and pursue your own sense of purpose. And this is how this ties in today, because that pursuit, you're going to need money for it, and sometimes to get money, you're going to need qualifications, but more importantly, on an even more basic level, to get that money coming through the door, which you will need to support, that will be, forgive the pun, name of a faction in ROH, that will be the lifeblood of your pursuit of these goals, because money is basically the ability to solve problems. It's Robert Rodriguez. Again, I've told you to watch this before. It's either called 5-Minute Film School or 10-Minute Film School. And it's amazing for anyone who has any interest in film, but also any creative endeavor whatsoever. But one of the things that he's talking about in there is you can solve problems in two ways. You can solve problems creatively or with the money hose. And what it means is, creatively, there might be a way for you to figure out how to do something by sitting at a desk, doing the work yourself, which is kind of what I've done with my entrances. I figured out how to film, how to edit, how to light. Like you'll see, this looks a bit more professional than the first kind of podcast that we did. I think it's in 1080. I don't know if it's quite in 4K. I can't even remember, but it looks half decent. Whereas the first ones we did, it was just sticking a camera down. If you look at my entrances as well, I've really done a lot to evolve them, and even like my entrance in Ring of Honor and stuff like that. That's a bit more, even musically, it's better produced. And I've learned to do that by honing my own skills, by being creative and solving the problem, but also using money to, for example, I paid a guy called Neil to help me with the production and the recording of the music. I paid, someone to help me film it. I paid a studio to record my vocals. Obviously, what I'm saying is, it's really a balance of the two. And when you're first starting out, because money's not in abundance usually for those getting into pro wrestling, most of your problems are solved creatively. But as your brand grows, you're going to need some money to get these projects off the ground. Now, also, here's the other thing that's really, really, really super important, because a lot of people are saying you don't need money, but understand this. You want to be making business decisions in pro wrestling based on your long-term goals. So, for example, this is just a basic example, right? There's going to be situations, and this is further down the line. When you first get into wrestling, you kind of just take any gigs that you can get, But later down the line, you might think, well, this is kind of how I feel I need to be presented. And at the end of the day, it's give and take, it's supply and demand. Now, me as an individual, we've spoken about this before. I've had situations in the past where pro wrestling promotion wants to present me a certain way, and I have to think long term for my brand. Is that going to be right for my brand long term? Now, if you can generate money from a part-time job, or maybe you get like a student loan, or a full-time job, whatever it is, if you've got that money that can get you that basic amount you need to get by, you now don't need to make that decision on where your next meal is going to come from. So let's say this promotion wants to present you in a certain way that you don't feel helps your brand, right? If you need that money, you're going to have to do that job, and you're going to be at the mercy of that job. Whereas if you can provide for yourself outside of pro wrestling, and this is really important when you're first getting in, then, it's important. What I'll say is, it's important if you're not able to make a full-time living from wrestling, because if you are reliant on the next kind of whatever it is, the amount of money that's coming through the door. You need to make that decision by going, I'm going to need to do that job, not that I want to do that job. And when you're managing your brand, for me personally, there will be a lot of people who disagree with me, but for me personally, I think that your brand is everything. Your name is your brand. And you have to make decisions based on what is going to be good for the long term. And you kind of need a little bit of a safety blanket when it comes to your finances in order to do that. Otherwise, maybe you're going to, jeopardize a business relationship. Maybe you're going to push too hard for a booking. Maybe you're going to come across as desperate. Maybe you're not going to make the most measured decisions that you can make because you're making decisions based on just getting money through the door as quickly as possible. Whereas the solution might actually be, you know what, I really appreciate the opportunity, but that I think, I'd like to show you what I can really do. How about I go away for 6 more months, get myself in better shape, have better matches, get myself more over, get more promos out there, and I'm going to come back to you in 6 months with an even better offering, and then maybe we can chat about it. So you're not able to do that if you don't have any money that's ticking you over. So that's kind of why I think that it's good to have some money to help you as a business ticking over without necessarily relying on, the next match to get by. And trust me, people, I have been there more often than not. I'm just kind of saying there is a power to making your money outside of wrestling to the point where you don't need wrestling. And even at the highest level, we hear about a lot of wrestlers who say, no, don't need it, don't need it, don't need it. And then they're getting crazy offers to come back. You hear about people who are offered deals, who turn them down, and then they turn them down, and then by the end they get offered a huge deal and they finally come in. Well, they wouldn't have got that huge deal if they'd have said yes to the first thing that came their way. Now, a lot of people sometimes the first thing that comes your way is the best thing to do. Like if you don't have a very big brand, for example, and someone is offering you a full-time contract, then it's going to make sense to sign that, right? But I'm just saying, it's always good to have options. And that's really what this podcast is about, is options. And one of the best ways to get options is to make yourself as, like cash flow is king. So you want to make yourself as, I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this, but you want to make it as easy as possible for you to make money outside of wrestling. And let's be honest, if you're dying to be a pro wrestler, right, then chances are you're probably not that enamored with what you do at your job, right? Maybe you are, and if you are, fantastic, right? But things that we're not 100% passionate about, we don't tend to put in the same level of effort into things that we are passionate about. So, for example, if you're working a full-time job or a part-time job that bores the life out of you, chances are you're probably going to be putting more effort into your pro wrestling, and that's great. That's totally understandable. I was in that position. So it's going to make sense. You want to earn the most amount of money possible for the least amount of hours, especially if you're going to be doing something you're not that passionate or interested about, because really this job or whatever it is going to be taking time away from what you really want to do, which is wrestling. This is why I actually advise trainees who come to me and say, should I just go full-time in wrestling, just take the leap? You hear a lot of people like Joe Rogan will say, if you don't have the safety net and this, that, and next thing, just go for it. And big fan of Joe Rogan, but here's the thing, that works for him because he's a very intelligent business person and now has a huge brand. And I just don't know if that's going to apply to every single person out there. I would like to consider myself fairly business savvy and pretty good at what I do, but I know that if I 100% relied on pro wrestling, I don't think I'd be where I am right now, because I've been able to make quite cerebral decisions as I go, because I've tried to be as smart as I can be with the small amount of money that I've had up until, I was able to make it a full-time job and stuff like that. So one of the ways to do that is to go through college or university and basically get a job that's based on a degree or a specific qualification. So in something like wrestling, it's good to have a broad set of skills, but in a professional environment, I feel it's good to have a very focused set of skills. So it's almost better, rather than being a jack of all trades, it's probably better for you to specialize in something. However, another approach, like the one I did, is to do a degree in business, for example, because I thought, well, a business degree is a degree that's probably quite prestigious, forgive the choice of words, but it's not, it's not doing medicine. It's not being a vet. It's not being an astrophysicist. It doesn't sound like something that's the most insurmountable degree ever. It sounds like this is the kind of degree where I can get a fairly decent grade, but still have time for my other interests. And that's why I really recommend business for people. The other main reason is that if you're going to be paid to do something, business, every business is a business. Every time, every possible situation that you could receive money, that is technically a business. Whether it be, whether it be state or government or a privately owned firm or self-employed or whatever, anytime that you're going to get paid, that's technically a business. Anytime you get paid. So doing a business degree will in fact relate itself to any job that you ever do. So if you're stuck for subject choice, that's the one that I would recommend because, yeah, you might not be interested in business as such, but when you start talking about your choices for your dissertation or certain essays, you can base them in the field that you're interested in. So, for example, I did mine on creative industries. You could do that on pro wrestling. You could do your thesis, you could do your dissertation or essays or projects or whatever on pro wrestling. And all of a sudden, it's just that little bit more interesting. In fact, a lot more interesting. So if you're going to study something and you're stuck for a subject choice, go and do business. It's fairly well respected. It's quite easy in terms of like, if you look at the amount put into the amount that you get out, I worked hard in my third and fourth year, but I didn't really have to do much before that, and I still managed to get out of there with a first degree. I busted maths in fourth year, busted maths full time, stopped everything else that I was doing, focused on that 100%. But really, 1 year intense focus got me a first class degree, and that degree in business again relates to every business. So I was able to get the interview. I don't know if I think once or twice I've maybe twice I've applied for a job and not got an interview. The degree or the college diploma or whatever it is gets your foot in the door, then it's time for you to impress. Really, for me, the toughest hurdle is getting your foot through the door because there's techniques to actually getting the job. But that's my advice for uni or subject choice. But hey, if you're interested in medicine or whatever, go for it. But just know that's going to take up a lot more of your time. So medicine is, in terms of earnings and all that, obviously that's a great investment of your time and money. Again, it's difficult. I know education is a little different in the US. So just beware. What I'm talking about here, in Scotland, we get a free education, free university education. Your tuition fees are covered, and usually get a student bursary and a loan that you don't really have to pay back until you're earning really decent money. And the bursary you don't have to pay back. So for me, university cost me, I ended up coming away with about, I think, 12,000 pounds of debt, which is for 4 years of uni, that's nothing. And that's student debt as well, which you don't have to pay that much on. It's pretty easy going. I know that's not the case in England. I know that's not the case in the States. So if you're listening in England or the States, obviously this is going to be a slightly different situation for you guys. But that's not to say that it doesn't work out. But if you get the opportunity to do an education like that, I would definitely recommend it. College, similar sort of deal. Or you could specialize in a trade. One way to do it is a lot of people feel in America that university education just isn't worth it anymore. And if a lot of people are coming away with hundreds of thousands in debt, so I can completely understand that. And if that's the case, what you do is maybe look at the job market out there and go, okay, what jobs can I get into where I don't have to outlay hundreds of thousands of dollars, but there's a huge demand? We've talked about this before, supply and demand. That's what a lot of this comes down to. In fact, that's what wrestling comes down to. I'm going to talk about supply and demand and low-hanging fruit, if you will, in a little bit. I'm going to explain what I mean about that. But this idea of supply and demand, you're going to say, right, okay, I'm going to go to university and I'm going to go to college, or if it's too expensive, I'm going to go and learn a trade. And if you're going to go and learn a trade, learn something that the market is demanding. So let's say there's a huge demand for plumbers and we just don't have enough. We've got enough bricklayers, we've got enough electricians, or whatever it may be. You do the research, but we need plumbers right now. Then go do a plumbing apprenticeship, because you can pick and choose your work hours, you can get paid well for it, and you can run it around your wrestling. There are ways to do this. There are levels to this. There are other ways that you can make money. A lot of people make money by, buying stuff in bulk, finding stuff cheap and selling it on Amazon and eBay. This can be done. You want to find these little life hacks, if you will, or market hacks, where there's a huge demand but not quite enough supply. You want to join that supply. So you want to find something where you can make decent money for, compared to the amount of hours that you're having to put in. But hey, on the flip side, I've also done minimum wage jobs, quite a few of them actually, and some of them while I've been doing other projects in the background as well. So there's no shame in a hard day's work. You can still make it work on that. Okay. My point is when you're first getting into wrestling, you really don't want wrestling to be the thing that you're relying on for your income. I don't think that's that smart a thing to do. You don't want to need wrestling. You want to want wrestling. And there's a key difference when it comes to approaching the task here. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in terms of that. You want to set yourself up to earn some decent money. But what I will say is having a good degree has allowed me to get, I've only ever really worked part-time while I was a pro wrestler. I tried having two jobs at one time before I went pro, but in 2016 towards the end, had the match with Kurt Angle and I realized my wrestling's not where it needs to be to face someone like Kurt Angle. I need to go full time. So that was when I made the decision. You will often find that your business will demand that it's time for you to go. You won't even be thinking, oh, can I make this work? By that point, you'll hopefully be in a situation where you can make it work and you know you need to give it 100% of your time, and that's when it's time to knuckle down. So, but until that point, you're going to need some finances behind you. Now, what do I mean when I'm talking about, supply, meet, and demand? Well, I'm just going to be real basic here, and I'm going to tell you about something called Porter's 5 Forces, right? And just look it up if you get a sec. I think that's the correct one. It's this little diagram I had at uni, but the long story short, what that all comes down to, and I use this, is basically it says that you want to find something that has a huge amount of opportunity, but there aren't a huge amount of people doing it. So, for example, see when MMA first came out, look, like, no disrespect, but you had people like Tank Abbott, like, contending for titles, whereas that just wouldn't happen now. The level's a lot higher. But when it first came about, the level was a lot lower, and there were opportunities to get in there. And I thought the same with amateur wrestling, for example. I was like, how many freestyle heavyweight amateur wrestlers are there in the UK? Oh, wow, there's only, maybe 10 or so that are really good in the UK. And I can, if I put everything into it, I can beat 10 people. Whereas if I was to compete in middleweight, now you're talking about hundreds. You know what I mean? How many people do wrestling? Then what's the average weight of someone? Then of that percent, how many are light heavyweights? Then how many of that percent are heavyweights? You know what I mean? That sort of thing. So what you want to do is that's what I call low-hanging fruit, if you will, is an opportunity that you can just jump in there and get some real progress and get things done. So, and I really, when I got into pro wrestling, saw the same thing. Like in pro wrestling, I saw a few kind of local shows, and sure, there were a handful of people there who were in great shape and good wrestlers, but there were a lot of people on those shows when I first started who would never get on pro wrestling shows nowadays because the standard is too high. Now, the standard is super high in pro wrestling right now, and that's something that you need to be aware of, is that the competition level is way higher than it was when I got into pro wrestling. In order to survive and thrive, there is no surviving. The moment you go, oh, I'm just going to survive, I'm happy with the spot that I've got, is the moment that it's all over. I've learned that in pro wrestling. You can't just be comfortable where you're at. Even if you're the world champion, you still have to be aspiring to be the greatest world champion. There always has to be a new goal, something higher than you. Because if you're not getting better, then guess what? The competition is. So, but what you can do is you can find something in pro wrestling that's not being served that well. So for me, for example, I was thinking, I watched a lot of WWE documentaries, and in one of them, they were talking about the importance of the entrance. And it really made me think of it, and I was like, yeah, I mean, the entrance is like half the battle. And then I thought, well, if I can have the most interesting entrances, then I've won half the battle. In fact, how many wrestlers do amazing entrances? And then of that, you go, oh, well, there's not that many. Can I be the best of that? Can I have the most unique entrances? Can I be known for my entrances? If that's half the battle, and I can be the best at that, then there you go. That's just one example. How many shoot amateur wrestlers are there in pro wrestling? Oh, there's only like 5 or 6. Well, if I can get into that group, I can be seen this way. That's what I'm constantly trying to do. So I recognize the competition level is higher within pro wrestling, but within these little subcategories and niches is where you can really make your mark. So, for example, another thing I'm trying to do in recent years is to wrestle more of like a shoot style, more like a Timothy Thatcher or a Jonathan Gresham, and tie those bits in. I'm like, how many wrestlers do that kind of thing? Oh, there's only a handful. Well, maybe I could be known to do that sort of style, and that's kind of what I'm going to try to move more towards. So again, low hanging fruit is probably the wrong term to describe that because the standard is still so high. But what I mean is, you want to look at your skill. What you look up this Porter's five forces thing because what you want to do is that's basically supply and demand, but also match that up with your skill set and your interest level. Like so, for example, if here's the thing: when everyone gets into wrestling, right, the dream gimmick is Goldberg. You know, you just go in, you kill everybody, you get out of there a world champion. You know, 2 minute matches, millions of dollars, hunky dory. You know, that's but there can only be one of them. Then it's everybody wants to be stone cold. You know, and it just comes in, batters everybody, and leaves. Okay, then there's The Rock. You see what I'm saying? It's like there's only room for one of those. So what are you going to be? So, for example, when I first got into ICW, the low hanging fruit, if you will, for me was oh, everyone's swearing here. Everyone's being extreme. I'll go in the opposite direction. I'll be like if what John Cena was like in ICW. You know, I'll be like early Kurt Angle. I'll be really cheesy. I'll never swear. I'll be the opposite of what they're being. So all of a sudden, you've got all the wrestlers trying to be extreme on one side, and then over here, you've got someone going in the complete opposite direction. And that is really what you need to start thinking about. How can you fit into these little niches? So low hanging fruit is probably the wrong word. What I would say is steer into your niche. Okay. So that's you constantly have to have that in mind when you're approaching pro wrestling. Okay, so just to recap, this has been a pretty productive session. We've been talking about, you know, how you can kind of get money coming in, how you can get qualified, how you can, and here's the other thing. It's all about options at the end of the day. The more options that you have, the better decisions that you can make. Again, even like, you know, any kind of thing with like going for jobs in the just the regular job sector or even in pro wrestling. If you've got 2 or 3 companies who are interested in hiring you, then you've got more options. It's always good to have options because then you don't have to make desperate decisions based on desperate situations. You can make the right long-term decision for you and your business, and you can attach the right value to your business, whether that be in pro wrestling or anything else. So remember, always give yourself options, but you need to be fluid as well about what your dream is. Like for me, again, the reason I talk about the ICW thing is because, you know, was I going in and kicking everybody's ass and, you know, winning every match? No, I was losing every match. So I had to get creative and find a way to be more entertaining than anybody else. That was my goal, at least, in a situation where I was getting beat every night. How was I going to do that? That's how I created the custom entrances, because if you watch my custom entrance, you never see who wins or loses. You just see the entrance where I'm slagging off my opponent, look like $1,000,000. And that subconsciously is what people start to see. And they just assume that you're a star. And that was my solution for getting around mass situation. But I wasn't going in there and winning every match. I had to get creative and have to think about how am I going to get over without the advantage of that kind of booking. Okay? So what I'm talking about is basically this is a little session on how to fund your pro wrestling habit, if you will. We've all heard that one. It's also about getting yourself qualified, putting yourself in a situation where you can earn the money that you need to keep these things going. It's also about how to approach certain situations, how you can basically, again, it's the same with the money thing. Again, you're looking at opportunities out there and going, what can I, and don't get me wrong, you're going to work hard, okay, but it's like kind of, what's the most efficient way that I can get a return on my effort? And for me, amateur wrestling at heavier weight class was the way to do that. And I'll give you an example right now. If I was to do MMA, I would do it at heavyweight. Now that sounds crazy because I weigh probably, I don't know exactly right now, but let's say 220 pounds, something like that, right? Obviously heavyweights are like, you know, 235 and above. Oh, well, no, technically it's 205 and above, but they tend to be 230, 240, up to 265. But the competition level at heavyweight is lower. The skill set is lower. Go watch UFC and go watch a non-title fight for the heavyweight title. You'll get people who have completely one-dimensional skill sets who end up getting world title shots because there's just not a huge number of heavyweights. So by virtue of the numbers, you're probably going to have an easier time facing someone who's decent at heavyweight than the chances of getting matched up with killers at middleweight or light heavyweight. You know, that's just an example of it may seem weird for me to go in at heavyweight and put on loads of weight to do something like that, but it would be because the competition level is lower. That would be the smart decision if I was to do it. So it's just kind of a different way to look at things, a different way to approach things. But hopefully that's been informative for you. I've been the prestigious one. Thank you again to all the Patreon subscribers. That's super appreciated, and the Twitch subscribers as well. Much appreciated. Check me out on Instagram.com/Joe Hendry. My Twitter is at Joe Hendry. Main one, check out Patreon.com/Joe Hendry, and keep your eyes open because we're going to have brand new training announcements for my pro wrestling school, which is currently full, but we've got loads of new info coming up soon. I've been the prestigious one, and I shall see you next time. Thanks, folks.